Good morning, learning as Chesed Shlema, V'ilana Chayav Asarach. We're on the Mishnah on the top of Ayin Ches Amid Beis. I mixed up the recording somehow yesterday because there's they changed the website and it really threw me off, like how I download the videos. Sagt der Mishnah, Hashoichet es hatoida lifnim belachma chutz l'chayma loy kiddush halecha. Someone who the taida comes along, there's a carbon, there's a shlomim, a carbon that's like a shlomim, together with all these breads, these 40 breads. What if you shechted the taida, the carbon, the animal, and he did it properly inside the Beis Hamikdash, v'lachma chutz l'chayma, but the lechem at that time was outside of the walls. Like kiddush lechem, the lechem doesn't become kaddish together with the carbon, which is going to have the effect that if something is kaddish kedushas haguf, then you can't be paid it. So this is coming to tell you it doesn't get that kedusha. Shachta actually karmu paneh. Another din, if you shechted the carbon and the bread had not yet crusted over, hadn't formed a crust on the outside, betanor in the oven. Rafilu karmu kulun chutz me'echad. Even if they were all 39 of the titus, chalas titus, had gotten a crust, and just one of them didn't, like kiddush halechem, again, it's not going to become a kiddush that it's going to get a kedusha haguf. So, my chutz l'chayma. When we're saying that it doesn't get this kedusha, this is like a new concept, right? That not a new concept. It's not something that we normally talk about whether it's puzzle or kosher. Over here, we're talking about whether it gets the kedusha haguf, that that it's going to have a special dinei tuma, that it can become tame even from a shlishi l'tuma, and like we said, that it's going to be able to be nifta. It's not going to be able to be nifta. So my chutz l'chayim. What does it mean? The chutz l'chayim, it gets kaddish. It stops the taidus from becoming kaddish. V'yechan chutz l'chayim is beis pagi. V'yechan says it means outside of the chayim is beis pagi, which is the chayma of Yerushalayim. That's the furthest part of the chayma from Yerushalayim, from the Beis Hamikdash. He says it just means outside of the Beis Hamikdash itself. The pasuk says, "Al chalas lechem chametz yakir kabane al zevach toidish shlamov." So when it says "al" on that, you should be makriv the carbon on the toidus, it means near them. So therefore, it has to be in the azara together. The toidus have to be in the azara together with the carbon. He says it as if it's outside of Yerushalayim, then it doesn't become kaddish. Kaddish, that would still be kaddish. He says al does not mean besamach. What al means is just together. You have to have a taida, you have to have the lachme taida, but not that they have to be physically near each other. In fact, the Gemara says everyone should know this. We already have this machlekes. It's not. Someone who shechs Pesach while he has chametz. The pasuk says that you're not allowed to that you're not allowed to have chametz at the time of your carbon Pesach. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer af hatamu. Rabbi Yehuda adds on, it's not just on the carbon Pesach. If you also bring the carbon tamid of on Erev Pesach while you still have chametz, he says is an additional law for that also. But in any case, going back to shechting the carbon Pesach while you still have chametz, it has to be that there's chametz that belongs to either the person shechting the carbon Pesach, or the one Ben Zarek the Dam, or the one of the Bnei Chabura are participating in that group that's eating the Korban Pesach, Imoy Ba'azara, and they have the chametz together with them in the Azara while they're shechting the carbon, because like we're going to say, he says it says al. Al means it has to be nearby. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it doesn't have to be imay bazara. As long as there's chametz, as he owns chametz, that's enough to be mechayev him for this law. So you see the same machlokes. Rish Lakish says al means besamach, and Rabbi Yochanan says no. Rabbi Yochanan just means at the same time. Al just means you can't have a toida together. You can't have you must shech your carbon toida together with the chalas toida. You have to have them, but Rish Lakish says, I'm sorry, it has to be imai. Has to be with him, physically with it. And Rabbi Yochanan says it has to be at the same time. And we say the same thing, Lagabi shechting the Korban Pesach with chametz. So Gemara Tzricha, we need both. The it my bahi, if we only said it by this, by chametz, wherever it is, chametz is awesome. There's no difference between whether it's in the Azara at the time of the Korban Pesach or not. Aval inya mekadosh lechem. Legabi the lechem, that the lechem has to be eaten in, that it's brought in the Beis Hamikdash. So it has there is such a requirement. It means it's only you have to shecht the animal inside the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, maybe you also have to have the Titus in the same place where you're required to shech the carbon. But it's what the Korban Pesach also you have to do it wherever it is. Yeah. It doesn't have to do with the fact that that's where you shecht it. What's the word? I guess it's this itself is kodesh, right? Chametz, there's no din kedusha on it, but the taida, the lachmei taida, there is a reason for them to be in the Beis Hamikdash. They're kosher. So maybe on that he's going to be moida to Rish Lakish. The Isa b'fnim Kaddish of Roy Loy Kaddish. Maybe if we said the other way around, we'd say he would agree to Rabbi Yochanan in the case of chametz that it's not necessary to be together. Tanya kavas Rabbi Yochanan Ashrechem Zatoyde Lefnim the Lach Machutz L'Chaim is base Pagi. If it's outside Yerushalayim, like Kiddush Alechem. So it's saying it has to be outside Yerushalayim, not outside of the Azara, so we don't darshan al b'samach. Zakuma, shachta actually karmu panel betana. We said in the Mishnah, if you shecht the carbon taida before the bread was crusted over, the lechem does not become kaddish through the shechita. Mino animili. The Tanur Rabban nachalis lechem chametz yakriv karbona al zevach shlomo. The Torah says on his chalis of lechem that are chametz, he should be makriv his karbona al zevach shlomo. Olam she'en lechem kaddish am ken karnu boneh b'taner. It says a chalis lechem. Chalis lechem has to be, in order by definition, in order for it to become chalis, it has to have a crust. It has to start crusting over. Yaakov Karbanai al Zavach Melamed, the Torah said, the pasuk continues, Yaakov Karbanai, when the Brisa continues explaining, Yaakov Karbanai al Zavach Melamed Shein Alechem Kaddish Ela B'Shchitas HaZavach. that it only becomes kaddish through the shchita. That you require the shchita to be mekadesh kedushas aguf on the lechem. Zevach toidish, zevach toidis. Ulamet shem shachat shaloi lishmon like kaddish halechem. That teaches you that if the shechita happens shaloi lishma, the lechem is not kaddish. Tan Rabban, yoitzin b'matzah no or b'matzah hasuya be'ilfis. You could be yoitzin the chiyuv of the matzah or the chalas, the loaves of the toida, with matzah that is partially somewhat starting to get baked, but not fully. It's partially raw and partially baked. Or with a matzah that was made in a pan. It means instead of baking it straight against the wall of the oven, they did it in a pan. My matzah no. What is the standard for something to be considered this in-between state of partially raw and partially baked matzah? Rav Yehuda Shmuel, kol sheparsa ve'ein chutin nimshachim heimena. Anything that when you pull it apart, it's no longer stretching like a dough, but it crumbles. It's interesting to me because it sounds like these are two totally independent things, matzah no and shekarmu poneh. Right?
Yeah.
It's like you would think, one would come before the other. It sounds like I guess you could have that it's no, that it's still like stretchy, but the outside is crusted, or you could have the other way around, that it's fully baked on the inside, but the outside did not get a crust.
But isn't one of matzah one bread? We're talking about by the
I mean,
toido. Chalas lechem, it was by the toido.
I thought all these, the Torah has both. It has chametz and
Oh,
it has both. And also, like we were discussing this yesterday, I think I was discussing with you afterwards, Rufal. Like these matzahs are different. They're not
yeah.
really, the matzahs are not really matzahs. The breads are not really breads, right? The breads are not, they're not leavened breads. There's no rising. Um, I guess there are chametz. There's some that are chametz. So those would be real breads. But maybe you're right. Maybe this is a difference. Maybe before we were talking about matzah, and now we're talking about the bread.
The opposite. Before we were talking about the bread, now we're talking about matzah.
I mean, that's so the karma paneh is on the bread, and the what makes it not a dough is when it no longer stretches.
Or we just never bake bread, so we're not in the, we're just,
No, I'm saying it could be the two separate tracks. There's the crust track, and then there's the dough track.
right.
You know? Okay. Amar Rava, v'chein le'inyan. So this is talking about matzah. Talking about yotzim b'matzah. So I was wrong about this. Let's go back. Yotzim matzah no means to be yotzim the chiyuv of matzah on Shabbos, on Pesach. So yotzim with matzah that's raw and matzah that's made in a pan. So Amar Rava v'chein le'inyan lachmei toida. The same will hold true l'gabe lachmei toida that it's only going to be lachmei toida when it gets to that level. Talking about pshita hacha lechem ksiv hacha lechem ksiv. It's called lechem, so that's what lechem means. Talking about ma'od tema echad amar achmana echad amar achmana shalayito paros. We had darshaned in the previous block that the previous mission that the Torah says a lashon echad, right? It says vikri menu echad mikol carbon, one of each of the carbonas of the carbon shumal Hashem kain. You have to give one of the tithes to the kain. We said shalayito paras that it can't be broken. V'hakaman the prisadami. If it's um if it's not fully baked, even though like we're saying the dough doesn't stretch, it's still not fully baked and it's easily going to break. It's something until it's fully baked, it can easily fall apart. So it's as if maybe one might say it's already broken. Kamash Malon, so that's what we're telling you. No, that as long as it's no, that's good enough. The other way around.
I thought you were gonna ask that, in other words, how do you have that it's not as good, but it has to be crusted? Crusted, I would think is like a little bit like well done. I've thought that it's
And
way
then
beyond the level
you're
of
going back to the
no.
original question.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were gonna ask now.
Well, no, I'm asking in general. Like I don't know which one comes first. Do you think one comes before the other?
Yeah,
That was the way I phrased it. Because, like
yeah,
you said, I don't know much about the.
yeah. Because now it makes sense what you're asking to me because it seems like a contradiction.
Yeah, one right. Let's say assuming that the it would be no, it would the dough would be fully baked even before it gets a crust. It means it wouldn't. I guess it would be the other way. I would think that you get a crust last thing.
Right, like the well done pizza.
Right. No, or like when I see when my wife makes challah, sometimes it's pretty much done, but the outside is still soft.
Yeah.
But
I think it's more like lava that it doesn't really get the crust until it's like well done.
you think so? You think so? You think the inside would be done before the crust? Yeah, that's like what?
So
Like
that,
what? What'd you say?
Like lava.
Lava.
That doesn't have really a crust. The whole thing
You're
is soft.
saying, and you're saying these are not really breads that we're talking about here. We're talking about matzah, and we're talking
Right,
about
but they would slap it on the tanner. That's how lava is done. They slap it on like a hot plate.
so you're
Uh,
saying, so you're saying that that's the last thing to happen. It's really done, but okay.
right, there is no crust. Lava has no crust until
Well,
it's like
it
really
has a
well
little
done.
like the outside is different than the inside,
Not
but it doesn't have
always.
a crust like we think of with a pizza or a challah,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's much softer.
It's the same color as the inside.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay, so but in any case, the point is that even though be that as it may, now we're talking about the requirement of no, that if the inside is sufficiently baked that when you break it, it doesn't like pull apart into dough, but it now crumbles. That's considered sufficiently baked that it's going to be yotze matzah with it, and it's sufficiently baked that it's going to be considered a taida. But one might think that even though it's true that it will break apart and it won't come to strings, it's still considered that it's prusa because it easily can disintegrate at that point still. So that's what we're coming to tell you, know that that's kosher. It Toidish shachta al shmoinim chalas. You're supposed to have 40 chalas together with your carbon tide. And this person said, I'm doing 80. Chizkiya Amar Kachu Arboy Mitar Shmoinim. Chizkiya says, we say 40 of the 80 are Kaddish, the other 40 are not, and he brought a good title. Yechon Amar Le Kichu Arboy Mitar Shmoinim. Yechon says you got to start all over again. You're not Makadish, you're not properly Makadish Lilacha. Amr of Zera, Kol Moedim Hechad Amar Likdishu Arba Mitar Shmoinim Kitchen. If someone said, I want to be Makadish, I'm Makadish 80, but I want 40 of them to be Makadish. So then certainly that's good. Al Yikdishu Abayim Elim Ke Yikdishu Shmainim Loikitchu. And if he says I want the dafka all 80 to be Makadish. I don't want 40. I'm not a cheap guy. I want to do it the right way. I want to do it big. So that's not Kaddish because the Torah said you have to have 40 and he was Makadish 80. Kipligi b'stama. If he just showed up with 80, and he says, I'm being Mekadesh them. Marsav alachrayis kamachavin. One Amar says, the Madam who says that it is good, he'll say that what he meant is, I really want to do 40, and the other 40 is a backup. So therefore, the original 40 is a Mekudesh. Marsav alachavin gadol kamachavin. The other one holds, no, he wants to do it, all 80. We didn't say anything bedavka, so he wants to do a gadol, and therefore, it's going to be it's not Makodesh. Abaya has a different shot. The Kuli Alma the carbon gadol, that's what the Messiah Shas brings M'Shem Shak, that he has in mind for a carbon gadol. And therefore it should be possible. He wants to do 80. Ubekli Sharas Mikachin Shalom Midas Komethli. The machlekes is about whether a Kli Sharis has the ability to be Mekadesh it against his will. That means that the way Rashi in the Ksav Yad explains it, when you shecht the animal with a sakin, the sakin is a Kli Sharis. So the sakin is being Mekadesh the lechem at the time that he's Mekadesh it, and that has its own independent volition to be Mekadesh the Toides. And the sakin's ability to be Mekadesh, since it's independent of what he wants, that'll be Mekadesh it properly with only 40. So even though he's yelling and screaming that he wants to do 80, the sakin has its own kayach to be Mekadesh it, and it does it properly with 40. So Marsav Klisharis Mekach and Shalom Midas. One Manama says that the sakin has the ability to be Mekadesh regardless of what the owner wants. Marsav Klisharis a Mekach and Shalom Midas. And the other Manama says no such thing. If he's saying he wants 80, it's 80. It doesn't make a difference that there's a Klisharis. Everyone theoretically would agree that a Klisharis is Mekadesh. But the question is a sakin shechting the carbon, is that also fall into the category of a klisharis mekadesh? Marsa a sakin mekadesh as klisharis. He holds a sakin is like any other klisharis, just like a pot, a kli, a vessel, that if you put into it, it's mekadesh without his das. Well, Marsa a sakin keeping the less leitoich ain't a mekadesh as klisharis. Says it has to the way a klisharis is mekadesh when you put into it. A sakin is shechting an animal, but not even contemplating the fact that it's you're shechting the animal to be mekadesh the taida, but just the fact that it's not, you're not putting it into a klisharis, that means that it doesn't have the ability to be mekadesh it against his will. Everyone agrees that klisharis generally is not mekadesh shalom midas. But over here we're saying maybe a sakin is better. Masav a sakin alimam klisharis. Avagad the less letoich mekacha, that even though that a sakin has the ability to be mekadesh something, even though it has no taich, it's a klisharis that has the ability to be mekadesh. We're assuming that it does have that ability for some reason. So therefore, it's better than a regular klisharis. So Masav Sakin loyalim klisharis, and therefore it reverts to the general rule that a klisharis is not makadosh shalom midas. So a number of versions of what the machlaikas would be that we discussed of whether you could be makadosh 80 if it's lechem, it's still kadosh. Zok the Mishnah. Shachta chutzlos mana b'chutzlum kaima kiddush halecha. If you shechted a carbon taida, and you did it chutz, we had a machshavas chutz lezman, a machshavas pigel, as we all know, that's chiv karas on the animal, or you did a chutz l'mkaima, which just passes it without a chiv karas. Kiddush halechem, the lechem is kaddish. As we know, there's a certain kedusha that applies even when it's pigel. Right? We say the pigel has to be in general a good carbon in order for the pigel to take effect. So there's a certain kedusha that comes by a carbon that's brought with a machshavas pigel and a machshavas chutzum kaima. Shachtav and imtzas treifa, but if it was found to be a treifa, the kiddush halechem, then it's not going to be kaddish. The Gemara is going to explain, because that's a psul that happened before the shechita. So that makes it that it was never a kedusha. It was never able to be mekadosh the lechem. Shachtav and imtzas balas mum. Rebbe Eliezer I'm a kiddush. Chamar loy kiddush. The Gemara is going to explain. Rebbe Eliezer says it's kaddish. Why is bal mum different than a treifa? L'chayr it's from before. The Gemara is going to explain. It's talking about duka shaba'ayin, a very minor type of bal mum, which we come across this shita. He says from Rabbi Akiva, and that's the reason why it's not a real mum. That's why it's mekadosh the lech. Shachta shaloi l'shma v'chein el hamiluim v'chein shnei kipsei atzeres shachta shaloi l'shman like kiddush halechem. If you did it shaloi l'shma, it's not mekadosh halechem. We had this in the Gemara just up on top. We dashed it from a pasuk that shaloi l'shma, it's not going to be mekadosh the lech. So even though it's it's at the time of Shechita, so L'chayra doesn't have that disqualification. So Masis and Mani. Remeir, this is like Remeir, because we're going to see it's a machlokes, Remeir and Rabbi Yehuda, what the machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and and the Tanakama, we'll see it's Rabbi Yeshua. This is like Remeir's version of the machlokes. The Tanya, Zakal, Kol Shabituli Koidem Shchita, like Kiddush Alechem. Anything that the soul comes before the Shchita of the carbon, the lechem doesn't become Kaddish. Pisula Achak Shchitas Kaddish, then the lechem does become kodesh. So that's the explanation of the beginning part of the Mishnah that we said that the treifa is not going to is not going to it's not going to be mekadesh the lechem. Shach lechutzos man v'chutzum koima kiddush halechem. Chutzos man and chutzum koima the lechem is kodesh. That's l'chayra at the time of shchita or after shchita. Shachta v'nimtzas treifa like kiddush halechem because that's before. Shachta v'nimtzas balas mum. Then this is the part that in our Mishnah we had a machlekes. V'leza ayme kiddush. If Yeshua ayme like kiddush. If Yeshua says it's not kiddush, if Yeshua is going to be like the chacham in our Mishnah that argue on Rebbe Eliezer. Divri Reb Meir. That's Reb Meir who has the same version as our Mishnah. If Yeshua ayme, I'm sorry, Divri Reb Meir. Amar Reb Yehuda. Le'nechleku Rebbe Eliezer Reb Yeshua al shachta v'nimtzas treifa. They both agree, just like Reb Meir, that it's nimtzas treifa, it's like Kiddush. And they both agree on chutz l'zmane by pigel that is Kiddush because pigel, like we said, there's a kedusha that there is a kedusha that has to be in it in order for it to become pigel. It has to be Kaddish, so it is Kaddish. And they both agree on a balmum shaloi Kiddush. Meaning not like Reb Meir's version that said Reb Meir, Reb Elazar, and Reb Yeshua are chaylik. They're arguing not on Balmum, but they're arguing on chutzlum kaimer. Reb Elazar I'm a kiddush, Reb Yeshua I'm a like kiddush. So what's the explanation for this machlek? So the Bryce itself, Reb Yehuda is going to explain it. Amr Reb Eliezer, hayel v'chutzl zamane pasel. Since chutzl zamane it's a puzzle, a carbon. The chutzlum kaime puzzle, and chutzlum kaime also is puzzle. Ma chutzlum zmane kiddush. So just like chutzlum zmane, even though its puzzle is mekadesh, the lechem ma chutzlum kaime kiddush. So to chutzlum kaime is kiddush. Amr Bishur answers back. Hay the chutzlum kaime puzzle, balmum puzzle. Ma balmum like kiddush, af chutzlum kaime like kiddush. Why you compare it to the chutzlum zmane? Compare it to the balmum, and the balmum is, according to this. In this version, there's no machlekes. They both agree that it's not kaddish because it's kaidem shchita. Amal Reb Eliezer, ani de mitzil lechutzos zman, v'ata mitzil lebalmum. We're arguing about it, so we've come to the point of our disagreement. You say it should be compared. Chutzim kaim should be compared to chutzos zman. I'm saying chutzim kaim should be compared to balmum. Ner lemi daima. Which one is it more similar to? Im daima lechutzos zman, im daima lechutzos zman, im daima lebalmum, im daima lebalmum. Hiskor Belazar Donim. So Belazar started saying, okay, let's figure it out. Donim psul machshava mipsul machshava. Chutzos zmani is a machshavas that he has a machshavas chutzos zmani, and chutzum kaim is a machshavas chutzum kaim. You always go together, so it makes a lot of sense to us. Donim psul machshava mipsul haguf, to do it from the balmum. A balmum, there's actually a mum. It's not a psul machshava. Hiskor Yeshua says, I've got it in my own cheshbainis. Donim psul she'ein by cars, psul she'ein by cars. Chutzos manish, psul she'esh by cars. Pigel is the only chiyuv here that we're talking about that has a chiyuv karas. But chutzlam kaimai and chutz and balmum, if you shech them and you eat it, it's not going to be karas, it's just a lav. He says, but I have something else to add on to my cheshbon. We have a pasuk that tells you that if you shech the shalei l'shmai, the lechem is not going to become kaddish. Shepsul machshava, shalei l'shmai is a psul machshava, ve'ein by karas. It also has a ein by karas, and it's not makadish. So let's say, in addition to learning it out from Balmum, I also have shalei l'shmai, and shalei l'shmai answers your question of that you said that Balmum is a psul migufay. Shasik Reb Eliezer had no answer to this. And essentially conceded, as we see in the Gemara, he conceded to Rabbi Yeshua. Zaktamar, V'Rameir, back to the original pshat. This is all in Rabbi Yehuda. Rameir had said, like our Mishnah, that they were arguing not about this, but they were arguing about Balmum. Rameir, Maishna Shachta v'Nimtzas Treifa Tahavi Psuloi Koidem Shchita, Umaishna Shachta Nimtzas Balas Mum Delehavi Psuloi Koidem Shchita. Why are we saying that Nimtzas Baal Mum, that you're saying it's not Psulei Koidem Shchita? L'chayr, it should be, if you say a treifa is Koidem Shchita, let's say the Mum is also Koidem Shchita. And with the Gemara, Bedukin Shaba'ayin V'Alibeder B'Kiva, like we said in the Mishnah, that it's talking about a specific type of mum, a flaw in the eye of the animal. The Amrim Allah Yardu, that this is a mum that you're not supposed to. It's still possible, but if you brought it up on the mizbech, it has enough kedusha that you don't take it down. So since it has enough kedusha that you don't take it down, it simply would have enough kedusha that it would also be makadosh to Torah. Rabbi Yeshua would say, he argues on Rabbi Eliezer. He would say, I even say, even according to Rabbi Kiva, Kiyam Rabbi Kiva, I'm Alula Yardu. He says, Lagabi going on the Mizbeach, that it doesn't come down. The Psula de Gufa, because it's a Psula de Gufa. Avladusha Lechem Loy. But to be Mekadosh, another thing, that Rabbi Kiva wouldn't go so far. Itma. Chatas Sheshachta Chutz Lazman. A Chatas that was shechted Chutz Lazman, was a Machshavas Pegel, him also Loy. If it goes up on the Mizbech, you don't take it down. Like we said, a machshavas pigel has a certain amount of kedusha in order to enable the pigel. Chutzlam kaima, but if you do a chutzlam kaima, Rava Amma terid, Rabba Amma loy terid. Rava k'Rav Yeshua, Rabba k'Rav Eliezer. L'chayra, this is going to track the machlekes of Rabbi Lazar of Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yeshua according to Rabbi Yehuda. Right? It's going to depend on whether. What is Chutzlam Kaimah compared to? Do we compare it to Balmum, or do we compare it to Chutzla Zmana, which a Chutzla Zmana is a also like Tered, Balmum it's also it is Tered.
I'll lawyer.
If do we compare it? Balmum is an alu Tered, right? And Machshavas Pigel. It's not tainted, right? It has a certain kedusha. But in the end, we said that Rabbi Eliezer was masking of Yeshua because he brought a raya also shaloi l'shmai. So we say that l'chayra that he was also chayzer since this machlekes of the chatas that whether sheshachta Chutzlam Kaimai, whether it has a din of Tered, is dependent on their machlekes. So he was also chayzer on this. V'ikadami avagav the hadabei Rabbi Eliezer l'gabi Yeshua, Rabbi l'gabi the Rabbi loy hadabei. Hazam would come alei nedunu mishalei l'shmai. It's only because we had a raya from loy l'shmai. Awal hachi daintelei mishalei l'shmai also loy Tered. Shalei l'shmai is not the same as chutzlazan. It's going to be also loy Tered. The din is that a machshavas chutzlus shaloi l'shmoi does not make it. It still has enough kedusha that it's also loy Tered. So Zaktimara, maybe you wouldn't be able to track the two machlokes. Zaktimara shachta shaloi l'shmo. We said in the Mishnah it's going to be possible. Amar Papa shavatani dan ayel nazar the shchiach v'naket ayel demiluim. We said a few things that is shaloi l'shmo. It's not going to be mekadesh the Titus, the chalas that go along with it, and we said the el miluim, and we said I forgot what the other one was. Anyway, but in any case, we didn't say ayel nazir. So why the Gemara is saying why did we say the ayel nazir? Why did we say ayel nazir, which happens all the time? I mean, it's possible to happen. And el miluyim was only one time back in the miluyim. They wanted to say the first example of this was by the Miluim, so we picked that to say instead of the Ayel Nazar. Okay, we'll stop over here. Be'ez Shem, tomorrow, I assume it's going to be pretty much the same schedule, even though